The work of St. Catharines-based sculptor Jim Maunder is on exhibit at the Niagara Pumphouse throughout the month of August. The exhibit is entitled Alchemy, reflecting on the transitions and changes in the materials that he uses.
I use a lot of rusting to turn the steel into the rusted texture. I use a chemical to change the bronze into its green color that you see in quite a few of the pieces. So there's a change there. And also with the wax, you get plant nectar, and a bee comes along, and eventually through various processes it becomes wax. So there's all these sort of changes of one thing into another thing. So that's where the word comes from.
A lot of these pieces in this exhibit have a space theme, and there's also many abstract themes, which is different than a lot of what you've done in the past where your focus was on the environment. What brought about that change?
This was inspired by a picture I saw by a 4-year-old. It was a spaceship with an astronaut reaching his hand out the window to grab a star, and it really struck me, that painting. And I always believe that 4-year-olds are the most honest of artists, because they're old enough to be able to handle some materials, and yet they're young enough that they don't they're not inhibited, and they don't filter what they do. And I think one of my goals has always been to try to get back to that point where I could be as spontaneous and as natural as a 4-year-old. And I think some of us spend a lifetime trying to get to that point. So a lot of that goes back to my childhood memories of that.
So again, a focus on your own childhood time, and some of the pieces have a very childlike outlook.
Yeah, well, that was kind of the point, and from the original inspiration was to pare them down and have them nice and simple. And I've used the X's and O's as stars and planets.
Some of Jim's work shows a subtle influence from some of the masters.
The piece that's called Re-Entry, I remember even as a kid being very aware of how the space capsule, when it was re-entering the atmosphere, could either burn up if it hit the wrong angle or bounce off if it hit at the wrong angle. And I was always very anxious about that myself when I was watching these things happening. So that sort of relates to that particular piece. But the Van Gogh reference in it, if you look closely at it, the swirls in the sky and the positioning of the stars and so on are directly related to Van Gogh's piece called Starry Night. And even the flames coming off of the space capsule refer to the trees in that particular painting.
When I think of a sculptor, I usually think of freestanding structures. I don't think of wall hangings. Why the change to things that are designed to hang on someone's wall?
Partly for practical reasons, I started making wall pieces because sculptures are darn hard to sell. I think people understand wall pieces a lot more than they do three-dimensional pieces. But I was able to work through encaustic, which I see as a very sculptural medium anyway. I have a lot of texture on the wax, and adding the metal. I'm still doing blacksmithing and welding and those sorts of things as part of the process, which is processes I've used in the past in my sculpture career. So I see these as a kind of 2.5-dimensional pieces. So they come off the wall a little bit. There are lots of texture and so on.
Jim Maunder's Alchemy is on display at the Niagara Pumphouse until August 31st. Interested in learning how to express yourself creatively? Jim will be teaching 3 different classes this fall at the Pumphouse. Reporting from Niagara-on-the-Lake for The Source, I'm Mike Balsom.